Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Show to View with Mike G, the show of life, the show of Brazil, soccer, communist, Romania, patents, and most of all, Cachaca. Today's guest is the founder and creator of Novo Fogo Cachaca, Mr. Dragos Axinte. He's lived an amazing life. We touch on a lot of different things. Growing up in communist Romania, the kinds of things that we in the States really take for granted that we have every day, such as hot water. I think it's a time to be modest and humble, as many people are being disenfranchised as we speak in this weird political climate of the current United States. But beyond that, Dragos is an insanely intelligent guy, learning languages, learning to write, working with his father to develop multiple patents for really amazing technologies that ultimately paved the way for his entrepreneurial spirit and the founding of Novo Fogo Cachaca. We sip some amazing expressions of the Brazilian spirit, and we get to know a lot about Dragos himself. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this great chat with Dragos Axinte.
Naturally, by default of the job itself, the sleeping is at odd hours, the eating is at odd hours. There's probably a lot of smoking to cut down stress. And so those folks never find their way to the gym. And on their day off, they find themselves bar hopping to their friends' bars.
Right.
So that's no good. You know, ever since I came into this industry in 2010, I've made friends with bartenders and I've seen them come and go fast.
Yeah.
And that's horrible for everyone. It really is, because they burnt themselves out. They need to get away from the industry in order to stay alive sometimes.
Right.
And we lose a customer. We have to invest in a new relationship with the new bartender, the replacement next year. That sucks for everyone, really. So we know we have to spend money on marketing. Might as well spend it on things that allow these folks the opportunity to find that personal sustainability, stay in their job, get serious about longevity,
right,
and develop that relationship with us too. And they are loyal to us for these things, because we're not offering them money or trips. We're saying, I'm just going to take you to yoga today.
That's right. Which is a great piece, and it obviously resonates really well in Austin. But
Absolutely.
For you, how many weeks roughly, or how many months are you on the road now?
It's a lot, but
it's a lot, right?
Yeah, I would say that I have a rule of not traveling more than 2 weeks, more than 1 week at a time. But I'm starting to travel 10 days at a time, and I want a week at home. But I'm actually getting a little tired, and so I need to rest a little more. I'm in my 40s now. And
how do you
I'm more susceptible to?
What's the best way that you know to take care of yourself?
Yeah.
Is it water? Is it rest?
I know it, but do I do it? That's
a good point. Yeah.
Well, I think rest is the first medicine and the most important medicine. Everything starts there. The immune system gets built when you sleep.
Sure.
And if you don't sleep enough, your immune system does not get rebuilt every day properly. Obviously, eating well is important too, and I try to eat as little red meat as I can, with the exception of when I'm in Texas.
I don't know. Do we have other options here, actually?
Yeah, and a lot of fresh things, obviously. You know, there's a saying that the more colorful the plate, the healthier it is.
Absolutely. I believe in antioxidants, that.
Yeah, that's right. And then in terms of alcohol consumption, obviously I drink because I'm in the industry, but as we were saying earlier, you have to learn how to drink properly.
Right.
And I have a lot of tricks of the trade on moderating that.
Sleight of hand.
Yeah. I would say that at the high, I average a drink per day, and that is a high. I try to actually not drink several days a week, so I give my body the opportunity to recover. I go to festivals like Tales with Cocktail. I probably have 2 sips of something during the whole week.
So you've learned.
I have, for sure, and also staying busy helps you stay sharp and not fall into consumption. I think that's important too.
It's a difficult balance at times, but I think the more that you're doing and the more that you're thinking, the more you're developing, socializing, all these things as a brand owner that we have to do, takes your mind off the booze a little bit. Even though you're talking about the booze, but it's more about, am I crafting the right message? am I connecting with people? And then it takes you out of the party mode.
That's right. Yeah, and by the way, when I told you that I'm taking antibiotics, I am taking antibiotics, so that's why I'm not drinking. However,
that would be amazing.
That is an excuse.
That's a great excuse.
Used often by a lot of brand ambassadors.
However, there is only really one commercial antibiotic that reacts poorly with alcohol. The rest have little to no side effects.
That's right.
So
I did ask.
Yeah.
I did ask the doctor last night. He said, it's okay, actually, if you drink a little, but it's still a good excuse.
No, understood. And obviously, I'm not going
to
prove it, Dragos. Prove it that you're taking one of those antibiotics. Well, so this story starts in an interesting place that I've never been. It starts in a time that I can't even relate to. And you grew up in Romania. I believe you moved, it was around 9 or 10 to LA. Is that about right?
In 91, I was 18 actually.
18? Oh, geez, okay. So
I graduated from high school.
That's incredible. So it's a massive journey. I imagine it's about the family business, but tell me what, as a regular white dude in Texas, what is it like growing up in communist Romania?
Yeah, it was communist almost my entire life. The last couple of years were what's called neo-communist.
Okay.
The 70s and the 80s were pretty harsh, actually. There was a dictatorship happening in Romania, communist dictatorship, and that meant that the president really didn't take notes from anybody.
Just did what he wanted to do. Right?
Yeah, and there was a lot of abuse. We grew up without food. I would probably have meat once or twice a month, really. And maybe a kilo of meat would cost one of my parents' monthly salaries.
That's
basically,
incredible.
Right? We didn't have hot water, although we lived in the capital city.
Yeah.
We didn't have gas or heat and those kinds of things. And
any siblings?
Yeah, I have an older sister. And I do remember when I was in high school, there was a particularly cold winter, and we really lacked things to keep us alive. But there was hot water. In the mornings, my mother noticed for about 15 minutes between 5 and 5:15.
Mm-hmm.
So she'd wake us up, we'd go take a shower, and then go back to bed, because that was the only opportunity to get warmed up and get cleaned up too. So those kinds of things really, when you're a kid, you try to navigate them, you don't think too much of them. But one winter I got really cold, and I've been cold ever since, really. It can leave a lasting impression on your body too.
To your bones, I suppose.
Yeah, I just, I love to take long hot showers because they comfort me.
They're cleansing. They are, yeah.
Yeah, right. So that was pretty hard. And then for my family in particular, it was harder because we had family in the relatives in the U.S. and also in France. So we were a naturally bad citizen. We were a target for just a lot of surveillance. So we knew if you picked up the phone, you could hear somebody breathing in the phone. That was before more advanced technology. Somebody was actually listening to your calls. And
no kidding.
when I'd come home from school with my mom, and she'd take a look and I said, "Oh, they've been in here again." And so we'd have to have conversations in the shower with the water, the cold water running, right?
Like a spy movie.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, and we were not the only people who were subjected to that. The idea of communist dictatorship is that you oppress the people into thinking that they don't have a choice, that they can't fight back,
right.
that the worst happens if they fight back. And
sure.
From that standpoint, I think that the tool of that oppression was making them believe that it was actually worse than it was. It was
right.
just saying that there's one Secret Service person for every 10 citizens. There's always going to be somebody who is going to tell on you if you say something bad about the regime.
So a sense of paranoia. Right?
It creates a sense of paranoia, yeah, and it took 46 years before, the sentiment of negativity built up to where people didn't care about what might happen to
them. So it loses its effectiveness.
That's right. Point, yeah, it does, because every one of these imperial regimes has to come down at some point. And so in 1989, there was a popular revolution started by a priest in his church, and there was a lot of support for this guy. People marching in the streets. I remember midnight. Suddenly there was light in the streets, which was not usually common, and it was dead silent. And then I hear these tanks rolling down my street, and it was a kind of a major arterial. And suddenly, a bunch of army tanks were rolling down, kind of following these demonstrators, just to create a show of force.
Right.
And that was the beginning of the revolution in Bucharest. It was the first revolution televised live. And this was 1989.
Locally, nationally, globally?
Well, I don't know, because we could only get our TV. But,
right.
prior to this, we had 2 hours of television per day, one station, and it was all communist propaganda.
Sure.
At this point, the television was conquered by the revolutionaries, and then just people rolling from the camera all the time. It was actually television station is always a place of power seizure. This whoever gets there and takes control of that camera gets the national limelight, can actually become a leader, and that's in fact what happened. But it was an eerie thing to hear gunshots outside and then hear gunshots a second later on TV, because it was alive.
Just a slight slight delay.
Yeah.
So you were really, as it unfolded, I was there. As the tension just mounted to a point where it could no longer be that version of Romania.
Yeah.
Because how old were you at this point?
So I was 1989. I was 16.
16.
Yeah.
Does it even register at that point? Does it even register?
Oh, sure.
Socially, how big?
Yeah, because you start to notice things. I mean, my family was really targeted. My mother never had. She was a teacher. She never had. What's the word? She was always a substitute teacher because she had relatives in the country, in the U.S., and as a result, she just was excluded from certain opportunities. My father was fired from his job not long before this. And,
just because of his affiliations with the West. That's so strange.
Which were, I mean, you have relatives, they call every once in a while, and we try to get them not to call too often, but because every one of those calls could
be monitored.
Yeah, and it could cause major problems with the family. But so I was pretty aware of things happening to us for sure. And so it was a good time to see the regime turn around. And I don't know if you ever caught this, but there was something else that was televised live that was very significant. The first time that's ever happened. The president, Nicolae Ceausescu was his name, and his wife, Elena, they were the bad people in this whole thing. They were the ones who had led the country for decades.
Sure.
And they fled, actually. They went by helicopter somewhere, and then the helicopter ran out of gas, was forced to land. And they were arrested. And then they were brought in front of a judge to be trialed by judge, and it was televised live. So
was it treason?
It was treason, it's genocide, and all sorts of things. Basically, the way it worked was for 2 hours, the judge shouted accusations at them. They did not have an attorney, and there was no jury. It was just this one guy whom you could not see, shouting accusations at these two. They could not even speak. They were actually not very smart people, and basically everybody was cheering, behind their televisions. And then this judge sentenced them to death, which was carried out immediately outside.
Immediately,
televised live, firing squad.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, we actually watched that. They were against the brick wall, and rumor has it that the platoon commander actually started shooting before he even gave the order. So they all just unloaded on them, and you could see them. They were pinned against the wall. Their bodies could not even fall down because so many bullets were coming at them.
Is it a moment of joy though?
Absolutely, it was the craziest thing. It was Christmas Day, and the country celebrated the death of these two people.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
You would never, I mean, I consider myself very lucky, and sometimes I don't know, and I can't relate to what people have had to go through to struggle for things. Now, I was never rich, right? My parents were relatively poor. But to think like you can't even eat meat but a few times a month, that you can't even take a hot shower but in the morning. Do you feel like that equips you to be so resilient towards anything the world throws at you?
Absolutely, yeah. It totally builds an immunity towards negativity, and you start to not to sweat the small stuff, really, as they say. It puts things in perspective, and you say, well, I've had a lot worse,
Absolutely.
And I didn't even tell you, my grandfather, who was injured in World War II, this goes back a long time, he was injured fighting the Russians because Germany occupied Romania before Romania turned weapons against Germany and joined the Allies.
Oh, wow.
And so he was injured, and he never received medical care for shrapnel he had in his entire body his whole life. So he had major problems from this, and eventually died of paralysis. 3 years paralyzed in bed. Never received medical care because he was caught fighting against the wrong guys, not because of his choice, but because of the way the country
the cards were dealt. Wow.
So persecution finds many forms, and it definitely cripples a nation until somebody rises and says, we've had enough.
Yeah.
And that's usually when it changes.
Which is an interesting point, just to take a brief tangent. we're in a very interesting era in modern politics in the States, and you've been here for quite some time.
Yeah.
Do you sense, is it a superficial kind of dictatorship persona that we're seeing now, or is it something more serious that we should be alarmed about?
Well, it's a good question, actually. I think that every negative factor in our lives, in our society, must be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe in the strength of the American system,
Sure.
which I think is the most solid I've ever seen. The most basic teachings are the ones that kind of last the test of time. And ours is based on the Declaration of Independence. And if you don't read that often, you should, because it's the strongest piece of writing you've ever read. Constitution, of course, was based on that too, so it follows along the same rules. The system is written in such a way that no single person can take down this country.
Right.
There are so many tools to prevent that from happening in the political system. And as a result, every 4 years, somebody wins the presidency and somebody loses the presidency, and the people who were supporting the one who lost freak out. And I tell them, don't worry, we'll be all right.
Yeah.
American system will triumph, and it always will.
It's not that different every time. We feel for some reason, we feel like we're bemoaning the system more than ever this time. You know what I mean? It's so strange to me. I haven't seen, and perhaps it's the bubble of social media, which really hyper
more communications, yeah.
Yeah, which hadn't existed 10 years ago.
No.
Is it really that different, or is it just another day in the whole state of modern politics?
Well, I have a couple of different schools of thought here. My typical approach to problems of this sort is to put my head down and move forward. Yeah. I think that what the political system does to your life amounts to about 1% of your life.
Sure.
And the remaining 99% come from the things that you do,
the
things that you say, and how you engage with those around you. Right.
The community. How
That's
you
right.
impact that.
Yeah, and because of that, I also believe in a system of leadership by example, by role model. So you do the right thing, and eventually people around you will notice that, hey, it pays to do the right thing.
Sure.
Maybe I'll do the right thing too, and it spreads. Right?
Positivity
and eventually
spreads, yeah.
Positivity spreads, right? And I believe that the humankind is naturally good until proven wrong. And
is that Hobbesian or Lockean? I can't remember which ones. If people are inherently good, I can never remember. It's one school of thought for sure.
Yeah. I think most people believe that, actually.
I hope so.
On the other hand, I think it is important not to allow things to happen and get too far, because we have been surprised once, and we could be surprised again.
Sure.
So there's kind of a balance now. There's probably a more acute awareness of this balance now than ever before, because things are a little more advanced now than they have been in the past.
Absolutely. And hyper-focused. It's so strange just how focused and almost obsessed we can get about something so singular, something so insignificant in the greater community, And
but it's amplified by social media.
That's right.
As you mentioned, yeah.
Do you have a presence there? Is that something you like to engage in?
In social media?
Yeah, to discuss, to collaborate.
That's a very good question. Actually, I don't talk about politics on social media. I sometimes make general statements about human life,
right,
and positive influences and things like that. But I generally tend not to say anything unless I have something positive to say. And that is a professional choice.
Sure.
People have gotten into trouble on social media for making statements that some didn't agree with when they were perceived to represent a brand or a company or a product.
That's right.
And there's no distinction between person and brand these days in social media.
Right.
So, but that's okay. My general preference in the rest of my life is not to say anything publicly unless it's positive.
Right.
I praise in public, criticize in private, and
right.
I think that's a pretty good rule.
I think so too. I think that's a very, very honorable rule, actually.
Yeah.
So this whole movement, this whole kind of rift politically in Romania drives your family. Did they have enough? Did they have an opportunity? And they're just like, we've got to get the fuck out of here.
The sequence of events was that in 1989, the regime changed. The guy who showed up at the television station and looked the best, had the best entourage, and spoke the cleanest, became president 2 months later.
Best brand.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I actually think that there was probably a little more than what we saw with the naked eye there. There was probably a seed that was planted by some other national entity, perhaps, to start this whole thing. And but he turned out to be what was later coined neo-communism. And so regime changes are hard, as we've come to find out here as Americans lately, right? They're particularly hard when you switch gears 180 degrees. You know, when communism goes away, everybody says, yay for free markets, for democracy, for everything that we've been wanting. But it's not that easy to achieve those things. There's a transitional period that could be very lengthy for people to transfer their energies and their understanding of a new thing.
Right.
And that happened in Romania. And after about 2 years, the worst had happened. There was inflation, there was recession, there was corruption. The black market was pretty much the only place to get things. In many ways, it was worse. And that was just kind of the price of transit. Yeah. But my parents at that point in time made a decision that they actually called us very correctly. They said the transition will take about 15 years.
Wow. And
they were right. And we do have relatives in the United States and actually in Montreal. I didn't tell you about that.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
So they said, for our kids, my sister and me, let's go over there because they need a better life and we shouldn't waste 15 years of their lives. So we had a choice on whether to join our relatives in Chicago, in Los Angeles or in Montreal, and we picked Los Angeles. We came as visitors. Yeah, we're on visitor visas, which are very hard to get. We don't even know how it happened. But we came here, and then the next day we applied for political asylum, which was promptly denied because Romania was not perceived to be a democratic country.
Interesting.
So then after that, followed a 10, 14-year, 16-year discussion with the U.S. government on what it will take to be allowed to stay here. They took us to immigration court. We were in deportation proceedings for many years because the U.S. government did not think that there was persecution still left in Romania.
Wow.
And
does that kind of linger over you? Does it loom over you? The fact
no,
that
I found a way to deal with it. You know, it took many years. It took me 14 years to become an American citizen, and it would have been more like 20 if I hadn't married an American citizen.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't know how it would have happened if my sister hadn't married an American citizen, because that's kind of the event that started it all. But nonetheless, even after over $100,000 in legal fees related, that's quite a bit of humiliation at the immigration office when we had to go annually to renew our work permits. You know, we had to wait in line and pay for these things. And at the same time, we pay taxes, and we were good citizens, and we support.
It has nothing to do with that, right?
No, it's just you just have to pay your dues to earn this privilege of staying here and working here. But I believe that's okay. I believe that's okay because it's sort of a sorting system of deciding who's real about who's serious about staying here and who's
extreme vetting, I guess.
It's extreme vetting. It's just a more positive form of it.
Right.
You know, my family eventually started a company, and we employed 25 people, and we created jobs in a lot of places and brought a lot of revenue into the state of Washington. And those kinds of things do matter because we were proving ourselves to be good citizens.
Absolutely.
And so I thought there was nothing wrong with that. It was frustrating and it was lengthy, but eventually I came to appreciate it more than perhaps somebody who was born with that privilege is.
Well, again, I feel in a sense almost shameful that I didn't have to struggle to be this.
You don't have to feel that way. You just have to appreciate it.
I do. And I think that the fact that people can't even re-enter this country with green cards and stuff
that's
at this
pretty
point
rough.
Makes me really appreciative. But should it ever be that way? You know, I mean, let's just put it this way: it's a very strange time.
It's a strange.
It's you were talking about Twilight Zone last night. It's almost like a bizarro version of the States. I thought we were all friends here. God damn, man! But people can't even get back into the country.
Well, if you look at the things that have happened over history, most of them have happened in the last 200 years, and most of them have really happened in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So much of it has happened in the last 2 months. There's an exponential growth to human interactions right now that's proliferated by the togetherness that we have globally and the fact that pretty much anything is acceptable these days. You can run your life the way you want it, and you can become famous, and you can become a leader, and some people will follow. So I think it's an even more important time not to get too excited about the negative role models in our lives, but to try to follow the positive role models. And I don't think you can live a life without positive role models. You spend too much energy on the negativity of that's around you. You become part of it, and you're not really participating in anything constructive.
That's right. You're letting it defeat you.
That's right.
And then eventually you accept that as the status quo, that shit's just fucked up.
That's right.
But that's not how it should be.
This is how I envision this. This is a metaphor here. Imagine a brawl among a bunch of people. There's like two people fighting over here, two people fighting over here, two people fighting over here, and it's in the office. Nobody's working, so you have a couple of choices. You can go and try to break up all these fights and get involved and decide who's right and who's wrong and discipline the ones who are wrong and do all of this, or you could sit down and start to do your work.
That's right.
Right, and eventually somebody's gonna notice, what's this guy doing? Why is
get riled up, man?
Maybe I should do the same thing, right? And eventually, I think that spreads. We were talking earlier about positivity spreads. That's really my tool.
I like it.
Yeah.
Put your head, as you said, put your head down and work.
And one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So the family business, from what I understand, is involved with welding.
No, kind of.
Soldering. Sorry. Yeah, which is a much smaller scale, different heat, temperature.
Yeah, but it's in the same family. Yeah, for sure.
And that was your father's trade in Romania as well when he...
No,
it wasn't. So
no, this is another immigrant story here.
No kidding. No, please.
Garage invention story. Yeah, so when my dad was in high school in the 50s, he got a job at the only TV manufacturer in Romania, and he was repairing the version of printed circuit boards that they had back then on our black and white televisions. And he did a lot of soldering and burned himself a lot. So he thought, maybe I need to come up with some kind of thing that solders but does not burn me.
Stop hurting me. Yeah.
So he actually developed some concepts and then promptly abandoned them when he went to law school and became a lawyer.
In what area of law?
Well, law in a country like that is very different.
Fair enough, yeah.
He became a lawyer. He did not really practice as a lawyer. There's only criminal law there. There's no civil law.
I see.
He ended up actually in... traffic education, really. Very, very strange. Driving schools.
Oh, nice. I like
commercial driving schools for bus drivers and things like that. He wrote a book. He did well with that. But eventually he was fired from it. So when we came to the U.S., my parents, white-collar people, arrived in the U.S. without really a word of English known. My dad was 50. In fact, the day that we arrived in the U.S., my dad turned 50 years old, and my mom was 48. And they had to figure out how to live in America. And that was hard. So my sister and I kind of became the providers for a little while. Roles reversed, and the understanding was they made a big sacrifice to allow us to come and live here.
Sure.
Now we have to turn
Earn
around
your
and
keep
do the same for them.
It's
kind of the curse of the immigrant, though. You know, the first generation is kind of a lost generation. The second generation could become a lost generation too, a sacrifice generation if they're not careful. So my sister and I went to school and had jobs at the same time, and my parents were kind of jumping around from small job to small job.
Yeah.
And it was tough for them. My dad was working in a bakery, and he was frustrated, and he'd come home and tinker in the garage because he was kind of
a
self-taught engineer and just liked to tinker. He created things out of frustration and stress. And after a few months of this, we saw him coming out of the garage every once in a while with some kind of thing that he had put together from like marker pens,
right.
Like lighter bodies, like flashlight bodies.
Fashioned together some kind of monstrosity out of the garage.
That's right, yes. And then it was always some kind of cordless appliance. Some appliance he had made cordless, I should say, that was good in the household.
Yeah.
And he would say things like, wouldn't this be great at Radio Shack? And I'd say, yes, it would, except I have no idea how to get it there. I was in my 20s. And so there was this one thing that was more interesting than the others, and it was a soldering tool that operated on... Right? Well, yeah.
Sorry, not to jump ahead in this story.
Yeah, it's basically it's cordless, and that was a big thing.
Yeah.
In the late 90s, there was really no cordless soldering back then, except for butane powered, which is not, which is more like what you're talking about, welding, or it's called brazing. Right. And it heated and cooled instantly, which was super cool. It just, his prototype, I remember, was really bulky, required 3 hands to operate.
Yeah.
And gave you about 20 joints before the batteries ran out. But I eventually started to show that to people. And I was at the time working as a banker and going to school at night as well.
University of Washington?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Creative writing now.
Well, I started out as a chemistry major.
Right?
Yeah. And then I decided that I knew all the chemistry they were teaching me in college because of high school in Romania, where I'd had 7 years of chemistry. And the thing I needed to learn was English. So I added English as a second major, and eventually I loved it so much that I just graduated with a degree in creative writing.
And even took it to a point where you were writing for local publications,
I
or
did
at
a
least
little
university.
bit, I had a few publications.
Did you have a real talk about writing for a moment? Did you about how long had you been in the States at this point? A few years.
I graduated in 1999, so that was 8 years after
8
I
years.
arrived. Yeah,
Did
it took
you
me
have-
6 years to get to college, by the way.
Well-
Working full time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we all gotta go through that. When it comes to writing, though, which is one kind of a vehicle to master the English language, which makes a lot of sense. But what kinds of things were you writing about? What did you want to express at that moment?
Yeah, right. Well, I started out actually taking literature classes, and my mother was a literature teacher, Romanian literature and language. So we had in Romania, we had 5,000 books at home, and I had read a bunch of them and not all of them. And I was always inspired by reading and writing at some level, short pieces.
Yeah.
But taking English literature classes and American literature classes, I found myself replicating the writing of classic writers. The classics are classic for a reason. They're very good.
As far back as Shakespeare, or a little more enlightened?
Really. I did write some Shakespearean verse.
Yeah.
I wrote
You loved a few
Chaucerian
women's,
verse, which is crazy stuff. And a bunch of things like that.
Yeah.
Early English novel and so on. And that was fun. That was so much fun, actually. I wrote like Douglas Adams, and I did a number of poems, early modern poetry, and so on.
A romantic guy? Would you say a romantic guy?
Early romantic poetry. I'm sorry, early. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, no, but ultimately,
I tried to copy a lot of the classics basically, and it was fun to write. And then I started to develop my own pieces, and then I really started to enjoy creative writing to the point where I'd go to chemistry class and write poetry instead of listening to the formulas.
interesting.
So that's pretty much when I said I'm just going to put chemistry on the back burner and finish this thing with the English degree, and then start this company with my family with this crazy soldering tool, because I did need to earn a living.
Yeah, creative writing it's not too lucrative, as they say.
Right. But it helped me get through a phase of my life where I thought that was the most important thing that I was lacking.
Really?
Right, English skills. So I graduated from the University of Washington in '99, and right away, within a month, I started Cold Heat, the company based around my dad's soldering tool, which turned out to be very difficult to put together, because to get it from that 3-handed prototype made in the body of a flashlight into a commercial product was something that I was not prepared for. And
what do you even have a reference for that?
Yeah, there was a reference, and I just, I'm very fortunate to have come across these positive role models that have shaped the direction in my life. And one of them was this man named Chris Bailey in Seattle. He was a founding director and investor at the bank where I was working.
Oh, okay.
And I left the bank and I took a job with him managing his personal investments, and as a part-time job. I could do that. I knew how to do that.
You felt comfortable with it?
I did, yeah. And I could also spend some part of the week working on this weird company idea that we all had.
In the garage, right?
And this is the late 90s. So at the time, this is the internet era. Investments are flying around. People are giving people $1 million just in the bathroom, on a piece of paper. And so the family was very active in making investments, and I was handling those for them. So I got to see a lot of startups, and I got to learn the world of startups. And I learned enough to write my own business plan and figure out how to get this together within about a year.
Yeah.
And he actually became the first investor because he was very impressed with my ability to have done this kind of on the side. And so we started this company, and at the absolutely worst time, the market crashed in March of 2000, and people were saying, you're starting to go, what company? What is soldering? What is that? It was written up by a press release as smoldering, which was
Jesus.
a funny thing.
Yeah.
So it took about, we launched it on the market in January of 2004 on QVC.
That's incredible.
Which, by the way, is an amazing company.
Oh, imagine.
It's a very scientific, well-run company. And
linked to Shark Tank. I mean, I've watched Shark Tank all the time.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you think about entrepreneurialism, and QVC is linked. It's inextricable with creating new products.
Yeah. Well, I'd gotten to spend a bunch of time literally looking for suppliers around the world, trying to figure out how to make this thing and find the right materials, putting it a patent. And it was an immense opportunity. I had no idea how to do any of it. And I still don't have an idea of my job. If I wake up in the morning and I look at my to-do list and I say, I know how to do this, then I'll just think something's wrong, right? I'll smash my head against the wall until brain drops back into place, and I'm starting something new every day. And at the time, it was really different. But I remember calling Radio Shack after some running around with different people on the phone, I got the soldering buyer. And he said, and this is the height of Radio Shack, they had like 7,000 stores. Right. And I blurted out, I have the soldering tool that works on 4 AA batteries and heats and cools instantly. And the guy said, that's not possible. I said, no, it's possible. I have it right here in my hand. He said, well, can you send it to me? I said, no, I can't send it to you. But I can come with it and show it to you. And he said, great, can you come in 2 weeks? So we made a date. And then
where was he stationed?
Fort Worth. Yeah, that's the headquarters for Radio Shack. And then as I was hanging up, he said, hey, do you have a manufacturer for your tool? And I said, no, I don't have a manufacturer. It's a little too early to think about that. Yeah. So he said, okay, well, call this guy. And they had a division that was manufacturing for them in Asheville, North Carolina. So I ended up calling that guy, and he said, well, if Alan will buy it, I'll make it for you. So it started a whole thing. That's incredible. We actually went well beyond that. We found better partners and started to produce this thing, launched it on QVC in 2004. And I was there at QVC in the green room, which is a fascinating place to be. And nothing happened for a whole minute. And if you don't do a good first 2 minutes, then you're off the air and you will never come back.
Right.
But I had taught the guy showing the tool on the live stage this little trick of putting his finger on the tool before soldering to show it's cold. Soldering, melting thing is like several hundred degrees, right? Yeah. And you can see the smoke and the red light comes on, and then you take it off and it cools in a second or two. So I said, put your finger back on, show how fast it cooled. And the moment he started doing that, the phone
demonstrating it,
ringing off the hook, and it was a blockbuster success.
That's incredible.
That first time, tool sold every 6 seconds. It was really cool. So that started a whole campaign. We had in 20,000 retail locations in 9 months, and we had an infomercial which was driving the retail awareness. And within 9 months, we were the best known soldering brand in the country.
That's incredible.
66% brand awareness. Yeah.
It all starts in a garage, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, all the presentations still showed my dad with his plaid shirt that's buttoned up to the top, because that's what he does, in his garage with all his tools around him, looking at the camera.
That's so incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the true American story, if you think about it.
Absolutely.
You tinker, you have this eureka moment.
Yep.
And then it takes someone like you to not be afraid.
To not be afraid. That's right.
Not be afraid to do it.
Yeah. And people want to help people like that. I mean, I'm the generation who's trying to help the younger generation. And I recognize when somebody comes up and has that energy and passion for whatever it is they're doing.
Absolutely.
That they're going to be successful because they're not going to fail.
Yeah.
Right? And they're just going
they won't accept it.
Right. That's right.
Keep moving forward.
So those people, I just get close to those people. I want to help them, give them advice or whatever it is they need.
It enriches our lives, I think, being around people like that.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurs, that spirit, that just, you're not going to let anything stand in your way. Yeah. And it's almost narcissism and sociopathic behavior. It's close, right? That sense of identity. But there's the passion, though, again. That's kind of what.
If you think that you're doing the right thing, I don't think it's narcissistic. Yeah. You're probably. I mean, I had a very serious reason. Soldering was not on my list of to do things in my life, but it was important for my parents. You see, it was something that perhaps provided an opportunity for my sister and me to create something of value that we could turn around and give back to my parents that they had created to start with, right?
Yeah.
And recognize the sacrifice they'd made by moving countries at the age of 50. Literally, we arrived in the U.S. with one handbag each person. That's all we had.
Wow.
So I thought this was worthwhile. And then along the way, I'm like, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning more in one day than most people will learn at their jobs in 2 years.
You can't pay for a degree like that.
Right. No, it's called a street MBA.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a good experience. I learned a lot doing that. And everything I learned there really shaped the way that NovaFocal came about. all the
so
lessons.
so let's talk about this chapter. I want to try the second mark here.
Yeah.
As we kind of talk
You
about
should.
how you're
We
introduced
have
to
many.
Brazil. We've got 2 others, but I suspect it'll be
3 others.
3 others.
Yeah. This one's hiding here.
Oh, it's a hidden one. Wow,
Yeah.
brilliant. Let's try the second one. So what is this guy?
This is we call this chameleon, and I'll explain in a second why. This is aged in oak for 1 year, and most people in the U.S. do not know that most cachaças are aged in barrels, and most of them are oak. In fact, I would say about 90% of the cachaça labels in Brazil are aged. And if you go to the south, our part of the country, it's more like 98% of the labels are aged.
Kidding.
And most of them, probably 60-70% of the total are aged in oak.
Oh, you get that on the nose, man.
Yeah, you get the oak, you get the vanilla and toffee.
Yes.
Yeah. And the reason why oak is multifold, really well, we know oak is tasty. It's porous, it ages well, and it's available, and it's affordable, and it's a sustainable choice, at least for now. Brazilian woods are not sustainable. In fact, most of them are in danger. So we are very careful with how we use those things. We have very little of those. I'll tell you more when we get to one of those. But oak in the last 20-some years has become kind of the new tradition for cachaça. And Dois, the man who started the distillery, was really probably just the second distillery to start using oak. To the point where in this time period of 15, 20 years, it's become such a success, both from the producing side with 60 or 70% on the labels using oak, and also from the consumer side where Brazilians really love oaky things. The oakier, the better. It wins competitions. In fact, the next one that you'll try actually was named the best cachaça in Brazil.
No kidding.
So
here's sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
You're a Romanian guy working in electronics in the States. How?
With a bunch of material scientists and PhDs.
That's right. How do you become at the forefront of a Brazilian heritage cultural product?
Yeah.
How does that even intersect? Where do you get the inspiration?
You plan your life a little bit, and then you also respond to opportunities. When I went to college and I was writing poetry, I was very creative. I was very inspired. I could write 10 poems in one night, perhaps, on some nights.
Drinking or not drinking?
Not drinking, no, I don't think so. I didn't drink.
That's really brilliant, actually.
And then I became the president of an engineering company with a bunch of people who were way smarter than me.
Yeah.
And my notepads at work had the math checkers, right? And I wrote formulas with amps and volts in them. And during that time, I did not write any poetry or anything creative. I thought about it a lot. I was running in my head, but you can't really get your brain to do both things at the same time. I think you have to condition your brain to do what you need to do then, but also to kind of get it set up for the next step. Yeah. So in my life, I believe that ultimately I'll end up making movies.
Really? Because as a director, as a writer?
As of everything, perhaps. I think that's the most potent, most effective way to teach people certain values.
May I ask you a few of the influential films for you? Something that drives you? I'm a huge film nerd. All film good, nerd? Bad, and indifferent. Yeah, all types of films.
I like all sorts of things. I have many, many favorites. The Red Violin was one.
Oh, yeah.
Lincoln was one. Kind of kept me on the edge of my seat for 3 hours. And I'll think about more by the end. But I don't. I tend not to have favorites, actually. That's something I learned from my wife. But you just
love cinema on the whole?
No, I don't like cinema as a whole. I like the opportunity to tell stories to people.
Interesting.
As long as those stories are important stories to tell. And history actually teaches us the best stories, so I want to make historical movies.
Interesting.
Yeah, I actually don't like most movies today. I have a hard time going to the theater.
Really?
Yeah.
But if something like Patton, how do you feel about something like that?
Yeah, sure. So historical things and classic movies, I think, are much better sources of education than the current cinema. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, but that's an interesting distinction to make. I like both. I like stuff that's gritty, that does tell a tale that actually happened, but at the same time, I kind of want to be lighthearted and fall in love all over again with the musical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it happens. It's a delicate balance.
That's right. Yeah, and there are different emotions we have to foster in ourselves in order to be complete individuals. So it's good to get a little bit of everything.
Absolutely.
But if I want to get there at some point in my life, I have to condition my brain towards that. And that requires a huge amount of creativity.
Yes.
Well, I couldn't have done that as working for an engineering company, right? So where I am right now is kind of the middle point between the science and the creativity. Novo Fogo is an amazing opportunity for me to work on a product that we define, that we manufacture, and also understand consumer psychology and how to resolve the problems within that consumer base, and then create the product that answers those problems, and then tell a story that's going to make it loved, right? There's a lot of creativity that comes into that, but it's not just. I still have to work on a lot of spreadsheets.
That's
right?
right.
It takes both
There's
sides
operations
of the brain.
and the marketing side of it, which is soft
Right.
and hard numbers.
But I still write most of the copy for our stuff. And
Do you really?
For a long time, it was my favorite part. It really is. I wanted to create a voice for the brand that would be consistent and make sure that the people who came into the company afterwards understood that and followed it. Of course, putting their own personal print on them on it, but still maintaining the tonality of the brand voice. And that's happening. So I'm not writing all the copy anymore, but I'm still writing a lot of it.
Yeah. I imagine that you still have a finger on some of it.
Never
fully give it up.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think that it's important to try to set yourself up for the next step of your life. Figure out how you're going to condition that brain to do what's necessary for today, but also to get it ready for tomorrow. Always have that 5-year plan in place and then a 10-year plan in place, and make sure that you're making progress as you move forward.
Do you get... I imagine your greatest foe is stagnation.
Stagnation. Actually, it's superficiality.
Oh,
stagnation
fair.
is good.
Yeah.
I like it for sure. I can't possibly sit still. I have not had more than a day off in the last 5 years. Right? There's always something to do. So you're right. But the thing that gets under my skin the most is superficiality. Is when people judge things based on very little information without really understanding what may be behind the scenes.
Do you experience that a bit on the road?
Yeah, I think the whole political scene is very superficial.
Sure.
I think people get irate about things they don't understand all the time.
They don't even want to understand, I feel, sometimes.
No, because it becomes ideological, and it's kind of like if your guy is doing everything right and the other guy's guy is doing everything wrong, and there's no room for objectivism and analysis, and that drives me crazy.
It's amazing. So when did this idea, I mean, I can't even imagine. I get the entrepreneurial spirit, and I get that you want to be creative. I get that spirits are a way to compose. Compose flavor, compose aesthetic, and compose a story. Right. All of those things. So when did Nova Fogo fully kind of take form? What year are we talking?
Yeah, so at one point, it was around 2009 or 2008 or 2009, I decided that I had my own dreams. And it was based on things that had happened in the past. So to start, when I was 8 years old, kid in Romania, I read this book called The Black Pearl. And it was about Pelé. Yeah, that's right. And it was a tiny little book, and it was amazing. I loved that book. So I just fell in love with the Brazilian soccer history, and I read everything I could possibly read about World Cup history.
What drew you to that? Because soccer
soccer
great.
is a huge sport in Romania, so I was definitely a big fan. Yeah, a huge sport. It was the most important sport, although supposedly the national sport is something that is kind of like baseball that nobody plays.
Really? Like cricket or something?
No, it's like baseball, actually. But nobody knows what it is and how the rules go. And so I actually learned enough about World Cup history. I thought at some point I'll write about World Cup history myself in the future. I might still do that. I actually have some movie ideas about soccer stories.
Never over.
No. There's so much you can learn from the past, right?
That's right.
And so I thought this Brazil country, it sounds like it's at the end of the universe. It may not even exist because it's so far away. But I want to go there someday. As a kid, I said that to myself. And then when we started Cold Heat, it was a good success, and it grew very fast. And our key supplier actually needed to expand capacity, and they thought they had a good solution in a factory they owned in Porto Alegre, the state of Rio Grande do Sul, in the south part of Brazil, very close to Argentina and Uruguay. And we started working with those folks. And I went there one day in 2005. I went there literally for 2 days. It took me a day to get there and a day to get back, and I was there for 2 days or less. And during those 2 days, I fell in love with Brazil and Brazilians, and cachaça and Brazilian steak.
What is it about the steak?
What is it about Brazilians?
What did you get that obviously I don't want to equate it, but Hispanic culture just has this vibrant and this kind of sense of community that perhaps living in suburbia in LA or in Austin does not have. So what unique quality?
There's genuineness, I think, but that is hard to find here. People in Brazil, and I mean all people in Brazil, obviously more those who don't live in the big cities, because the big cities will develop some of the same qualities as here.
Sure.
But I was in a big city, and I met people who were incredibly unassuming, very modest, humble, and very respectful and loyal to the opportunity they had to work at a time when Brazil was during pretty heavy recession times. And I thought, well, that's fine because we're employing all these people. We're giving them parts to make, and they're getting paid.
Right.
But then I started to find people who had no idea who I was. They did not even know that I was a foreigner, and they were still kind to me on the first blush.
Amazing.
And that is so meaningful to me because it tells a lot about the human essence that appeals to me. That whole bit about humankind is good. Deep down inside, he was clearly alive and present in Brazil. So I thought these people are beautiful inside and out. And out too, by the way, especially in the south. Porto Alegre and Curitiba are the home of supermodels.
That's right. I've heard about this.
Yeah, yeah. It was hard to walk down the street, and there were a lot of good-looking people. And so it was not hard, actually. It was good.
You found more and more ways to go walk down the street, I'm sure.
But I didn't have a lot of time. I actually literally had 45 minutes of free time during that that short trip. But I came back with a bottle of cachaça and a Ronaldinho jersey that the host had given me. And I said, I like this stuff, cachaça. I'd actually gone to Brazil saying, I got to try a caipirinha because I'd had it in Manhattan the year before. And I did not realize how big a deal the caipirinha was to Brazil. So as I arrived in Porto Alegre, and the host took me to a Fogo de Chão restaurant, which is actually the original Fogo de Chão, no longer exists, in Porto Alegre. As I walked into the restaurant, I gave them my coat at the door, and they handed me a caipirinha, and they were ready. And by the time I sat down on the table, that caipirinha was gone.
Yeah.
I thought, this is amazing stuff. So I had a lot of caipirinhas during those 2 days. So as I came home with this bottle of industrial cachaça, I literally went through it in the next party. And people were saying things like, how come I've never had this drink? This drink is amazing.
Right.
And I saw people double fisting them too. So I started to look for cachaça in the U.S. And this is 2005. It was impossibly hard to find cachaça. Sure. There was nothing that was nationally distributed. Our category pioneers were struggling to figure out how to get distributors and tell consumers
different industry
what this thing
completely
was.
At that point.
Yeah, the category is 500 years old in Brazil and literally only about 15 years here in the U.S.
Astonishing.
So years passed, and I was just always kept an eye on whether or not there was cachaça at the bars that I was going to. And one night, my wife Emily and I were at the Trader Vic's, and I thought that place would have good cachaça, and didn't. It had just one industrial brand. And so I thought, well, somebody's got to bring better cachaça into this country. And maybe that could be us, especially since I really love Brazil, and I want to spend more time there.
You wanted an excuse to go back.
I kind of did. It was the question was, can we make this personally interest into a business? It's kind of the wrong way to go about things. But the more we did the research, the more we realized that there was a lot of opportunity. The category was in its infancy. It was small. There were a lot of gaps in the product offering. There was nothing organic at the time. And I know something or other about small categories. We increased the soldering category 5 times ourselves.
It's incredible.
We were that 400% growth, really. So I thought, well, we can do the same thing that I did with soldering in this world. And we got more and more interested. And then basically what we did was we said, let's see if we can find a distillery we can partner with. Because the idea was you buy a distillery, you build a distillery, or you just partner with the distillery. Right. And the third one was the easiest option, especially as now we're in the middle of a global recession.
Sure.
And I'm this crazy guy whose dreams have just awakened in the middle of a global recession, going to another country.
2 drinks in.
Let's do something new. And if people did not know what soldering was, well, I'll find something even harder. It's cachaça, right? Yeah. So, but that I suppose there's an addiction to that. But I think it's an addiction to making something cool, discoverable by people who otherwise wouldn't have access to it.
Right.
That's what I call innovation. You take something out of a context where it's common and ordinary, and you put it in a new context where it's uncommon and extraordinary. That's right. Innovation, right? I like that. I want to do those things. I'm not inventing anything. I'm just putting it in a better context and giving a better story.
You're like a director framing
A
it
little bit,
in a
yeah.
different way.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
different scene.
Yeah. I do love positioning things. So we started this process of looking for a distillery, and at the beginning it was just online, literally looking to see who's there.
Yeah.
And I had developed this questionnaire with a bunch of questions to send to these distillers to find out if they're a good match. And we had 3 requirements besides good taste. The requirements were that we wanted something organic because we knew that at the time, so this is 2008, 2009, 80% of Americans would pay up to 15% more for an organic product than its inorganic counterpart. And I thought, well, cachaça, Brazil, sugarcane, lots of it. Maybe we can find inexpensive organic sugarcane to make cachaça. The second requirement was that of sustainability because, and this is actually very important, Emily and I have both been very big proponents of rainforest preservation. And we believe that Brazil holds the key to the future of the planet. You know, there's the saying that Brazil is the lungs of the planet. And it's really true. There's the Amazon forest and there's the Atlantic rainforest where we're based. And between these two, Brazil has close to 50% of the world's species of plants and animals and a lot of trees.
Absolutely.
And these trees, as you may know, translate carbon dioxide into oxygen. They actually store the carbon dioxide. So
they filter it.
Yeah, they do.
Take it out.
But what you may or may not know is that when you cut down a tree, that creates pollution because it releases that stored carbon dioxide.
I actually didn't know that.
No, at one point, deforestation was the number one cause for pollution in the world. And
CO2 increases.
it accounted for more than the pollution created by all the world's vehicles combined.
So to reframe this, so once a plant dies, so as long as it's alive and breathing, it will consume and it will hold the CO2, the carbon, ultimately. But once it dies, it releases all of that into the
it stops putting out oxygen because it's no longer there.
Right.
And 2, it releases that carbon dioxide.
I had no idea. I didn't realize that. Do you think, is that common knowledge for people?
No, it's not. Every time I mention it, people don't know it.
Yeah.
No. Now, because there's been better management of forest resources, that's no longer the number one source of pollution. I think it's something like 18% of total pollution.
Wow.
But it's still a lot.
That's a lot.
Right. So the Brazilian story with forests has been that it's kind of been a mess over the last few decades. The world basically went to Brazil and said, you are the steward of a global asset called the rainforest, the Amazon in particular, and you have to take care of it for us. And we don't trust you, so here's how you're going to do it. Well, that never works. You can't go to a neighbor's yard and rearrange the yard.
How to do it, right?
Right. And so there were a lot of problems with deforestation, especially in the Amazon, where there's a lot of lawlessness. It's hard to enforce preservation because there are no trees. The canopy of the jungle is so thick, you can't see it from above. All sorts of things happen below that canopy. But perhaps it was even worse in the Atlantic rainforest. You see, the Amazon lost 17% of its original mass. It's at 83%.
Wow.
But the Atlantic rainforest, that sliver of green on the coast, and there's only 7% of it left. 93 is gone.
When did the deforestation really start?
When the cities were founded. The big cities on the coast, São Paulo has 20 million people. Rio de Janeiro has 5. Santos has 5 million people. Curitiba has 4 million people, and so on, up and down the coast.
Yeah.
And so people come and move there. They have to cut down trees to build houses, and they have to cut down trees to build houses twice, right? So the tree in our logo, by the way, is an endangered tree. It's the symbol of the state of Paraná. It's a pine tree, and it became endangered shortly after the World War II when there was an influx of people moving there after the war.
Wow.
So we thought that the way to go about this whole problem was, once again, not to go and tell them what to do, but to find the role models and come and tell their story and help them become financially, economically successful so that their neighbors see what's happening and say, oh, I can do well by doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's lucrative.
It's the same thing we've been talking about the whole time here. And so we were looking for that role model citizen. And we found the right people. We found our kindred spirits in the town of Mojetes in the middle of the Atlantic rainforest, state of Paraná, in coastal mountains, blanketed by rainforest overlooking the Atlantic coast. This was a zero-waste distillery that was USDA organic certified, and every single business practice was right, and the people were great.
How long did it take you to adapt to the language and culture?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it took me a lot shorter than other people would require, but it was still hard. If you look at Portuguese, if I gave you a text in Portuguese, you could read it, especially if you speak Spanish, you totally understand it. But then if I read that text in Portuguese to you, you'd be like, what? Right? You see the word restaurante written down, you understand that. But if I say restaurante, you kind of don't know what that means.
That's right.
Because the pronunciation rules are very difficult. So that was hard for me. In fact, I found myself speaking faster than I could understand as much. And 2009, 2010, before the Olympics and the World Cup there was very little English in Brazil, and the ATM cards wouldn't work, and your cell phone wouldn't work, and the GPS that was supposed to be in the car wasn't in the car, and there was not a single GPS in the airport to be found, and it was hard to navigate. It was really hard to navigate at one point. The first trip, the trip where we went and saw 7 distillers around the whole country over the course of 2 weeks, sorry. That was hard. The first few days were rough. Like we couldn't pay for things.
Sure.
We had no cash at one point, and no way to get out of 20 cash machines that I had tried, and the credit card wouldn't work at the restaurant.
You, right? Like, yeah.
And this is one of the most developed banking systems in the world, but it just wasn't matching. Now it's very different. It's easier.
Sure.
There's English on the ATM menus, and taxi drivers speak English, and so on. So the two sports festivals have really helped with that.
Yeah.
So we wanted to find those people. So we wanted that story of sustainability. And the third thing was that we wanted to be able to tell the story of the simple life. And that was stemmed from our understanding of what was going on with the human spirit in the middle of a global recession.
What does simple life mean to you?
Yeah, so if you remember a few years ago, suddenly nobody had money, or the people who did closed their pockets because they didn't know what was coming.
Right.
So nobody went to the mall anymore. Retail therapy no longer existed.
Yeah.
People didn't go out anymore. There was a high rate of unemployment, etc. So we replaced those things, those tools for satisfaction, with more personal communications and interactions. Suddenly, instead of going out, you'd have people come over. It turns out that you don't have to party on a Saturday really hard. You can just have people come over for a simple dinner on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And still kind of enjoy the company of your friends that way, or your family. There was a lot more that happened in terms of human interaction. And I thought, well, Brazil probably can tell us a lot of stories about this, because especially those people in the country, they have a very simple life. And in our town of Morretes, the people of this town actually coined the term a vida mais simples, which means the simpler life. Not the simple life, the simpler life, more simple than simple, right? So in Morretes, what that means is that you care about the following things: family, friends, food, drink, nature, song and dance, and football, soccer. Right?
7 things. It's pretty good.
Something like that. Yeah. And everything else is just dirt. Doesn't matter. You do those things with your friends. You do those things with the same people you work with and you live with and you see. And there's a very smooth transition to the day. And when you have fewer objectives, you accomplish a higher percentage of them. You have a higher level of personal satisfaction from day to day. You wake up energized in the morning saying, today's going to be a good day too.
Yeah.
Right? That was a story worth telling Americans.
Absolutely. How does, if you think about, and we'll try this third installment, I like the installment of this saga of the Cachaca. Okay. How does this, you think, translate those values to someone who sips it? How do you feel like it represents the simpler life?
Yeah, so I think that a product is more than the liquid in the bottle. I think you put something in a person's hand and then you leave, and whatever you put in their hand is your salesperson. So in the way that we build our brand and our product line is very consistent. We have a brand image. We actually have a brand book in which we say these are the kinds of colors we like to use because they express these sort of emotions.
Right.
These are the kind of graphics we use and backgrounds.
Style guide.
That's right. It's totally a style guide. We round the corners because we think that square corners are pokey. They trouble the mind subliminally, right?
Right.
And also there's a function to that. They don't get bent very often. So we do these kinds of things, and then we apply those guidelines to everything about the product, to the bottle, to the booklet that I gave you here, to our menus, to our classes, to all of our interactions, so that when I hand you a drink, it's not just the drink itself; it's a story with the drink. In fact, we say we're a storyteller, a marketing company that happens to own a distillery, right? We like to tell stories. That's why the first employee that Emily and I hired was a full-time videographer.
Really?
Yeah, crazy, right?
David Fincher was out of work, I guess.
It was great. Yeah, I mean, we make a lot of videos. Video is the greatest tool for telling stories. Like, you can see
visual
that I agree with
element.
that. Yeah, and we bring Brazil over here with these beautiful video stories, and then we use all those for training, education, the class. Yes, we had a live tour of the distillery,
right?
But we take it on celebrity cruise ships for cocktail and spirits classes. We give people an inside look at the mountain and the jungle, and it puts people in a good mood. I believe that every interaction we have with a consumer or anybody really is an experience.
Sure.
And an experience must follow 4 steps every single time. And they kind of come in order. The first one is relaxation. People come to you from all walks of life, and somebody's mother's sick, and somebody got fired, and somebody suspects that he's being cheated on,
right.
And other people just got a huge bonus or a new job, and you kind of have to bring them to a common denominator. So you got to relax those people, bring them to that common place. The second step is entertainment. You can accomplish a lot with humor, actually. It relaxes people, makes them trust you more.
Sure.
Right? You crack a joke, people like you.
That's why I make stupid jokes all the time.
Well, you should.
Dragos.
Humor is the most viral of all things.
Yeah.
You drop what you're doing when you get a good joke, and you share it with your friends, right?
Absolutely.
The third thing, now that they're relaxed and trusting, is to educate them. And this is an important step, because now you wouldn't have been able to just start telling them things when they arrive. But now they're ready for the education. So you can start talking about where this thing comes from, how it's made, something that they didn't know before. Yeah. And it's pretty easy to tell people about cachaça when they didn't know about it, because a lot of people don't know about it.
Sure.
And then the final step is always that of inspiration. You have to leave them with something that's going to make them continue to think about this.
Right?
Yep.
Keep tapping them in the mind, in the inspiration areas, I suppose.
Yeah. So try to find something that they can apply to their own lives that's going to be relevant to them long term. And those 4 steps create an experience, as well as the drink itself should engage all 5 senses, because the more senses you engage, the more memorable the experience, right?
Right.
But when I say experience, I mean handing a drink over to somebody during an event or giving a 1-hour class on a cruise ship. All of those are experiences, small and big. And so we try to apply those rules to everything that we do, both graphic and emotional.
A constant and consistent aesthetic.
Always.
A style
Voice,
guide.
aesthetic, and style.
A thoughtfulness towards people and the psychology of it as well.
Absolutely. When we started the business, we wanted to create our own brand, and we named it Noel Fogo, and we had some pretty specific ideas about how this brand would look. And we said it will be based on the people and the place where it comes from, provided that those people in that place are respectful of life, right?
Right.
And but it was a kind of an idea to go to a bunch of distillers and say, yeah, we don't like your brand, we're going to create ours, we just like your juice, right?
How'd they respond to that overall?
Well, I think there was one who did not like it, but the others were fine with it. Our eventual partners were thrilled with it, because they saw the story that we wanted to tell. And they said, this is very strong. This is representing of us. In fact, I remember somebody said, your pitch is our business plan. This should be easy.
It's
right?
amazing, yeah.
So anything you want to do in that direction is fine. It represents us just fine. And we intentionally built the brand on these folks, because they had a real story. The easiest way not to get lost is to be yourself.
That's absolutely right. Well, so let's try... We'll talk about, or I'll be able to talk about some of these other extended SKUs, but we've got a third bottle. It's so profoundly darker.
Yeah, it is. The first one was, the Chameleon was only 1 year in oak, and this is 2 years in oak. So only a little bit more, but in the jungle, it's hot and humid, and aging happens really fast. So the difference between the 1 year and 2 year is profound, like you say. It's much oakier.
The
a lot more
nose
vanilla and toffee.
Absolutely different.
Yeah.
Well, so let's use this as kind of a gateway to talk about this most recent chapter. I see you as a very, very shrewd businessman who's been able to execute things in a creative way? Like you're riding the lines or riding the lanes of being creative and operationally proficient, right?
Right.
That's not an
Absolutely,
easy
yeah.
balance to
No.
make. So how long now? So we're talking, you guys are, Nova Fogo is about 5 years,
Yeah, we
In
launched
operation.
2010 actually, so we're a little over 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm actually not in the right year. I still don't date
I
my checks
understand that.
appropriately. What would you say for someone who probably had a good insight going into it, understood the story that you wanted to tell? What is one of the main lessons that you've learned that you never thought things were going to turn out in that way?
Yeah, okay. I have one. When we launched, we said, we're going to do this ourselves. We're going to do this without investors for as long as we can because we want to control our destiny, live or die by our own sword.
Right.
And so that meant that it could take longer to grow. And it certainly did. It was 2 people with a little help from family. And in the first, after 6 months after we launched, actually, my wife was diagnosed with 2 breast cancers simultaneous. And so that was 2 years of our life. Really, it takes forever. You always live with that. But it was 2 hard years, during which time we were more of a 1.25 person company, with her being less than optimal. And all I tried was not to lose any balls, not to drop any balls. And we managed to do that. We juggled everything, and we just kind of kept it going. And then we started to grow it. And we hired some people, raised some money eventually, but only after we proved the model, figured out the story that was right, the product line that was right, the operational structure that was necessary. Also figured out, super importantly, what kind of distributors were going to be optimal for us, and where we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. All those things, I wanted to execute the original vision and see if it works before we start sharing with other people. And to somewhat of my dismay, everything from the original vision in 2009, 2010 has happened.
Wait, why is that to your dismay?
Because, life takes unexpected turns. And
Right. And this was not it was
I
calculated,
thought it
right?
would change. Yeah, I mean, I thought that something would happen. Somebody would come and persuade me to change my mind about something.
But your wife ended up being okay?
Yeah, she's
in
okay.
remission,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, 6 years now, and she's a partner in the business. She works with us full time.
Perhaps that was the unforeseen turn,
yeah, maybe.
right? I mean, because
But it didn't deter us. It actually strengthened some of our beliefs.
But
And
it still is one of those things you didn't ever think would anchor what your
Yeah.
original vision.
Yeah,
was,
that's fair.
you
That's
know?
fair. Yeah, it actually was the beginning of the wellness programs.
Really?
Portland Cocktail Week 2011, which I think was maybe the second Portland Cocktail Week, maybe third, but I think second. And my wife had just had a bunch of chemotherapy and a bunch of surgeries, and I talked to the folks at Portland Cocktail Week, and I said, I want to do a run, a 5K run through the streets of Portland to raise money for cancer awareness and research. And they jumped on that, and they said, we would love to help you with this. So I literally, on my own, I got the permit from the city of Portland and worked out the whole thing. We had a few volunteers from the festival who helped out. And the concept was, it was called Bartender's Run to Kick Cancer's Ass. And we had these little bracelets with this engraved.
Right.
And I said, it costs $25 to run this race. And 100% of your proceeds will go to Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle. But if you're a bartender and you start and you finish on your own 2 feet, the company will pay the $25 for you.
It's amazing.
And it was awesome. 50 people and a dog showed up.
You pay for the dog.
That was Mabel. I think she ran for free. And people gave extra money, actually.
Yeah.
And only one bartender rode on the hood of the car for a few blocks.
That's
And this is Portland Cocktail Week, so obviously there's a lot going on with alcohol.
Right, yeah.
The run was supposed to start at 10. I remember DDO actually showed up at 9.
DDO.
Yeah. And said, let's go. Let's do this. And I was very impressed by that. It was a good turnout. It was a good result. It made me feel very good. And that was the beginning of saying, we got to do more of this. So then we had a soccer tournament for bartenders from around the country. And then now we do 5 days worth of exercising and running at Tail to the Cocktail and individual classes for USBG chapters around the country as well.
Focus on health.
Focus on
innovation.
It's mostly health, yoga, and we're sponsoring a soccer team of bartenders in Portland, and spinning. And there was one time we had a baseball game between Kansas City bartenders and St. Louis bartenders.
That's a good match.
Right before they actually went to see the real professionals play against each other. And we did the foraging trip from Denver and a snowshoeing trip from Boulder and some things like that. It's kind of cool. We're trying to adapt to whatever that city likes that's going to get them off their butts. Because it's also super easy not to have anybody show up when it's not the right choice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, so, when we take this inventory of all the kinds of things that you've done, all the kinds of things places that you've been, it's been a good run, yeah? It's been pretty fun?
Yeah. It's, I believe that experiences shape the future of your life.
Yeah.
It's like trying on shoes and understanding which one works well. And I try to learn from all of these experiences, and I strongly believe that it has shaped my knowledge platform, and also the resilience you were talking about, the ability to deal with conflict and not to get irked by it too much. And you go from one place to another place, and then you go to another place, and you go to another place. As long as you're moving in the right direction and you're consistent by your values, you're building, right?
Yeah.
And it's working for me. Yeah,
Seems
I like what
like
I'm doing. Yeah, I work hard. Sometimes I don't sleep. Sometimes I get sick, as you might know.
Yeah.
And but if I didn't love it, it would never work.
Wouldn't matter what.
No.
Well, so because I've talked to a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. I've talked to a lot of people from different backgrounds, but you have such a unique background. There's a bit of conflict. There's a bit of success. There's ups and downs, troughs.
A lot of conflict.
A lot of it. I want to know, and this is my last question to you, because one, I know that this isn't over. I know that you're going to do more. You're going to find other ways to innovate. It's just something I know, right?
Yeah.
But for you, and I ask this question of all my guests, you are at your favorite bar in the world, wherever that may be.
Yeah.
You're drinking some cachaça, or maybe a glass of wine, depending what you're in the mood for. You can sit there and engage any person, living or deceased, in a conversation. Who would you want to sit there and have a drink with and just talk, have a conversation?
I try not to think about people and favorite things and favorite books and favorite movies, but I actually like to talk to the common people. I find myself catching a ride, a taxi or an Uber, whatever, in New York that has the biggest diversity of this country, with somebody who's from some country that I hardly even know anything about. And I start a conversation. I ask, how do you like living in America? And then just the floodgates open, right? And the conversation is astonishingly unique, interesting. And it gives me perspectives that I, as an immigrant, did not have, because I did not know that country was going through so much turmoil.
Right.
And what this guy's going through and his family at home is going through is astonishing. So I found myself sitting in a taxi for 20, 30 minutes after we've arrived. And I'm talking to the driver. And those are the most valuable conversations that I actually have with people. Those are the ones that stick with me.
And that's exactly what I've experienced here. Your background, it's profound to me. Again, it's been violent. It's been full of conflict, but full of love as well.
Yeah.
So the cachaça has been brilliant. And I got to take a picture of all these amazing bottles that you have. But thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being intrepid, being bold, not being afraid to be a guy who speaks his mind. I've heard wonderful things about you, and I can't thank you enough for sitting down and chatting with me, Dragos.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. It's very nice to be able to express some of these sentiments.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Well, there we have it. What do you guys think of Dragos Axinte? It's an amazing brand, that Nova Fogo. The Prata is wonderful. The oak is a great expression of this sugarcane spirit. But the thing that's even more compelling is how intelligent Dragos is. He sees opportunities. He doesn't know how to speak English. He learns. He wants to write, so he learns how to write. He wants to start a spirits brand, so he designs a bottle. He embraces an aesthetic, and he uses his passion for both humanity and health itself to develop a really lovely spirit, but yet a really, really captivating visually and aesthetically brand. Dragos, it was brilliant to get to sit down and chat with you. Incredibly educational. Thank you for sharing your story, the ups and downs, the topsy and the turvy. And I am really, really proud of your efforts to make sure that people in this industry stay healthy and at least know how they can stay healthy. So thanks everybody for listening to Show to View with Mike G. No matter if you're addicted to the Great British Baking Challenge and understand that there are only 3 seasons on Netflix, but yet there are far more on BBC Online, or if you're really looking forward to visiting France here in a few weeks to sip some fine Calvados, please keep dancing.